Minister, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with Bloomberg. There's so much to talk about here at ADIPEC, some of the long-term drivers of energy, but also short-term as well. So I just want to start with a piece of news that came out overnight, the decision by OPEC Plus to delay putting back extra barrels to the market by a month. It feels to me as though there are a lot of downward pressures on the price of oil right now, lots of bearish issues at play. How do you see the short-term outlook now for oil markets?
Well, I think, first of all, the decision by any producer, whether they want to restore the cuts or delay the restoration or, undo the cuts, these are sovereign decisions. I don't comment on them. I want to make a general submission to you and through you to the audience that there is enough oil in the world today. There is no shortage of crude oil. Today, even with one large economy facing some strain, it's a very large, second largest economy. There are more oil coming in on the market from Brazil, from Canada, from Guyana, from other countries. So I think that plus the global turbulence, I'm not only talking about February 2022, I'm also talking about what's happening closer to where we are sitting. The market is factoring all that in and the price is still only 70 or so. Now, I'm not wanting to tempt fate. Tomorrow, if there is a large-scale conflagration and things spiral out of control, all bets will be off and the price could, volatility and price could shoot up. I don't see that happening because more oil is coming on the market. And I think even if you look at how people are planning for the medium long term, prices will remain within a specified range. I'm choosing my words very carefully because those who have that source of energy need to bring it on the market to earn, revenue for their own development. And it doesn't make much sense keeping it underground for a long period of time when the transition is taking place at a very fast rate. You look at the Indian case, we have gone from 1.5% biofuel blending in 2014. We've come to nearly 20% by October next year.
Yeah.
We have had a target of, this 20% blending was a target up to 2030. We brought it to 2025. But more important, green hydrogen, solar, wind, all these are making. If our oil prices remain very high, my understanding is that plus global turbulence accelerates the transition. So there are various stakeholders. In my situation, many of my companies would be very happy if oil is available at more reasonable prices. But two of them are also producers and refiners and exporters. They get very unhappy because they want the oil price to be high.
Yeah.
So there are winners and losers in all the situations. But short to medium term, I don't expect very much change.
Yeah, you said that you see a range, though. Can you give me some more color on what range you see?
I ultimately come from a large consuming country. We have a high rate of import dependence. Don't go by my range. My range would always want the price to be much lower. But range, something which is good for producers, consumers, and the rest of the ecosystem.
How do you think the U.S. elections are going to determine what happens to oil markets from here?
No, I'm not going to succumb to the temptation of telling you what the outcome of the U.S. election is going to be because I have an idea as to who's going to win, but I'm leaving that aside. Look, U.S. already produces 13 million barrels of oil in a day. No, okay. India imports $20 billion of oil from the United States. Recently, because of environmental considerations, some pause button was pressed. But I was in Gastech in Houston, and I was told, not by my people, but by various eminent Americans who came there, that no matter what the outcome of the elections is, US's production and exports will continue. I don't see a newly installed government in January of 2015 suddenly say we are going off the oil market and we're going to stop producing and exporting. We buy $20 billion of oil from the energy from the US every year.
It sounds to me that it's going to be difficult for OPEC Plus, and I know you don't speak on behalf of them, to actually successfully bring those barrels to market given all of the extra supply that's about to
Why
hit.
are you saying this? So that you think if they bring those barrels back, the price will come down more?
Yeah.
I think if you look at it slightly differently, the price is going to remain stable or come down in any case. If you don't sell your barrels, the Brazilians and the Canadians and the Guyanese will. I mean, that's a medium to long term prospect. So sometimes you have to take a call on that, whether you want to keep it for another day, but there may not be another day.
Yeah.
I mean, suddenly you could find a Guyana in India. You could find another Guyana elsewhere. So I think these are philosophical decisions, which we all have to
Okay.
take.
Let me ask you a medium-term question. I thought it was really interesting. OPEC are forecasting that India will be the single biggest contributor to oil demand growth in 2050, adding 8 million barrels a day. That's 3 times as much as China.
It's not just OPEC.
Are those numbers realistic?
It's not just OPEC. I mean, the International Energy Agency, which is based in Paris, I think they also said that in the next 2 decades, of all the oil demand growth that's going to take place in the world, 25% of it is going to come from India. You know, I mean, look at the objective facts. We have a population of 1.4 billion people, 8.2% rate of growth in fiscal year 2024, okay? And if we sustain, let's say, a growth rate of 7% or so, you're going from a $4 trillion economy today to a $7 trillion economy to a $10 trillion. And our consumption of oil is 3 times higher than the global average. So if there is demand and there is going to be usage, there is a future there.
Does that give you more leverage, bargaining power with some of your suppliers, given India is said to be the largest marginal driver of demand?
That's a sophisticated way of asking, are you using the market card?
Are you?
The answer is yes. Wouldn't you do it? I mean, you have got demand, you've got growth, and you've got more and more suppliers. And if one person is, let's say one entity is being difficult, we turn around to the other one. How would you like it? Therefore, if you look at the Indian shares of 5.5 million barrels a day, the main suppliers earlier used to be 800,000 barrels or 1 million divided between 4 or 5 suppliers. Now it keeps shifting.
Yeah.
And somebody who's close by to India has a geographical advantage in shipping costs and freight costs. They may decide to take advantage. My imports from one large source were 10% down last month, but partly due to refinery reasons. But in future, if somebody raises the price, we can get it cheaper elsewhere.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about Russia. It's accounted for about 40% of India's total imports. Little less. Okay. Would the Indian refiners be comfortable taking that number to, say, 50%?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of the refiners because these are market-based decisions. The oil that you produce in a particular source has to be suitable for use in a particular refinery. Not all refineries can use Venezuelan oil, for instance. Okay? Not oil, or some of the Middle East oil is, of the kind which can go into any refinery. So I'm not in a position to answer it. Well, I would say that if the price were right and if the, situation so warrants, it could be considered. For instance, when I was looking at the figures in February 2022, I could never imagine that our imports from one source will go up from 0.2% to 38%. But it's a little decline now because the other sources are close by, becoming more competitive. I don't know.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about the geopolitics, though. The U.S. and the EU have said that they plan to impose harder sanctions on Russian LNG. You've said in the past that India wouldn't buy LNG from the Arctic LNG plant in Russia.
No, let me tell you what sanctions. The term is very loosely used. When it came to oil, what we had is a price cap on Russian oil.
Yeah.
Russian energy was coming in. The Russian energy coming in through a pipeline to Hungary was coming in. They're still buying billions of dollars worth. Russia is selling $14 billion worth of critical minerals to Europe, EU. They're selling oil to Japan. So what is at stake on Russian oil came under a price cap. But please, Bloomberg, look at it from my point of view. If I'm asked to buy cheaper oil because the other guy can't sell beyond a point, should I be happy or unhappy? That explains the thing. You asked us to buy cheaper oil. We said we are happy to buy cheaper oil. And then their shares went up. Now the others come to us. I can't say through Bloomberg, but confidentially say, how much discount. I said, speak to my companies. When we float a tender, quote competitively and you'll be all right.
So sanctions don't work then?
No, I don't. They were not sanctions. They were the price cap.
Price cap.
No, the price cap. So the point is, if you have a good piece of art to sell or a good product to sell, it's a question of what the market can take. Russians were producing 13 million barrels of oil before all this happened. The Americans are producing 13 million barrels of oil. Now, it has come down. They've got come down considerably because their refineries, this thing, etc. But the market determines these things. I can't sit and take a strategic decision because nobody's asking me. It's my OMCs or oil marketing companies are answerable to their stakeholders. The private sector companies are answerable to their stakeholders.
Well, this conference isn't just about the long term and some of the demands on the energy mix, but also deal making as well. And I'm very curious to hear about the partnerships that ADNOC, Aramco have in place with some of the refiners in India. Some deals were inked in the past, but I'm just curious to hear about the types of discussions that you're having now on refinery projects within India.
No, we had the privilege of hosting the Crown Prince. The Prime Minister had invited him, a large delegation which came with him. The oil marketing companies had some discussion there. All the oil marketing companies are here now. The private sector is here. I only find out about what deals, as you call them. They're arrangements, technology arrangements, critical minerals, other things. I only find out when they're announced. And even if I knew, I would not talk on the public forum. But it's a very positive partnership. Whereas India is looking at productive assets in the UAE. We have one of our companies has 150 engineers here. We are looking at further investment by them there. So it's a partnership which is significant by today's standards, and it has the potential of growing even more in the coming years.
Just to round up, I want to bring it back to the theme of this ADIPEC, which seems to be just looking ahead and extrapolation of the new sources of energy demands, be it the growth in the global south and emerging markets, but we also talk about the growth of data centers as well. Ultimately, when you look at the ultimate energy mix that is going to power all of this demand, these sources of demand, what do you see it looking like, and how crucial a role are hydrocarbons going to continue to play in the future?
Look, I see a tremendous growth in biofuels, natural gas, compressed biogas, green hydrogen. After 2030, I see green hydrogen. But having said all that, traditional hydrocarbons are still going to be a very important component of that overall matrix for at least 20 to 30 years. It depends on how quickly you make the transition. It depends on how much you need it. I would never have imagined in 2015 that India will be, doing 20% biofuel blending by 2020. I would never have imagined. Do you realize that green hydrogen, now that we've got breakthroughs in pump storage, now that we've got other parts of technology, the electrolyzer business doing well, you cannot predict the exact amount. But I think anyone who suggests that hydrocarbons would be insignificant in the next 20 years, I would not be able to subscribe to that.
Do you think AI is a game changer for the energy
100%.
growth?
Today we are at the beginning of a new era. My Prime Minister saw this significance of artificial intelligence and all that goes with that system, the fourth industrial revolution, very much earlier than most people. He got all of us together in the Vigyan Bhavan, which is a conference center, called the world's leader in that, and he spoke to the cabinet, spoke to the senior officials. Today, India is using artificial intelligence for automating our refineries, for boosting our, our program in solar and wind. And now the data centers which will come. Sultan Jaber made a brilliant point. He said if you do a Google search, it will be this much of energy. You do a search on ChatGPT, it will be a geometrical progression of that. Today, artificial intelligence, and you have to use it productively and constructively, is not only a game changer, but it's already showing you the path where the changes are coming.